Hello, and I hope things are beginning to make more sense to you now. And hopefully the issues and insights that came to light during the assessment stage of the programme have been clearly recorded so you can begin to explore how you can address them now and moving forwards. The next section is all about emotional awareness and how you can learn to become more emotionally aware, as well as using strategies to help you address unresolved emotional turmoil which you've bottled up. Therapeutic journaling is one of the simplest and easiest strategies to use as a way of acknowledging past and current unresolved emotional issues. It can also often result in significantly positive outcomes, both emotionally and physically, which is why I always encourage people to at least try this first, even if you don't feel writing is your thing. In fact, it's also known as expressive writing. And did you know that many of the really successful people in business, including Richard Branson, use this regularly because of the benefits? I've heard it said that expressing your thoughts onto paper is like being able to close down all the browser tabs open in your head. This means it can be helpful in reducing the self-induced stress caused by trying to stop our thoughts flitting around from one thing to another and ruminating over things, therefore improving the chance of gaining clarity and insights. Do make sure you read the journaling ebook first though, so you have a clear idea of the various ways you can use therapeutic journaling, as well as how to deal with any distressing emotions that might surface. It can be helpful to break significant traumas down into manageable sections by using a mind map. In this way, you can begin by addressing one area at a time, and as you feel ready, gradually work through anything else relevant. This might take a few days of exploring all areas of a trauma or issue, but the aim is to ensure that you allow any unresolved, distressing emotional memories to surface. Allowing them to surface to conscious awareness often neutralises the emotional charge involved in any automatic and unconscious protective responses, because it becomes clear that these thoughts and emotions are not dangerous after all. An example of this was an occasion when I suddenly began to feel anxious while vacuuming one day. I had no idea what had caused this, and I couldn't think of anything I'd been thinking about which could have caused this sudden response. I therefore decided to stop and explore this through journaling, first writing down a question at the top of a piece of paper, which was, what has just caused me to feel anxious? I then just offloaded quickly and freely onto paper what I was doing, what was happening that weekend, etc. And as I wrote down that my children were going to Lapland, the anxiety increased. Knowing I was on the right track, I continued quickly before I could censor it, and out came the thought that had been quickly and automatically repressed before I even became consciously aware of it, which was, what if the plane crashes and my kids die? Now, for a parent, this is a very scary thought to have. Yet even before the thought had reached my conscious awareness, it had triggered my emotional brain and resulted in a very real, physically felt anxiety response. The anxiety actually became part of a protective response from the massively threatening thought that my children might die. Merely by acknowledging the thought and how I felt, and then being able to put it into perspective, allowed my system to go back to normal and the anxiety to resolve. This maladapted protective response, which might be causing pain or any other stress-induced symptoms, could be triggered by any threatening emotion which is perceived to be a potential threat. This will vary from person to person, and it will also depend on your experiences in life. It could, however, be because you're at risk of showing your vulnerability or ruining your self-image, which in our culture and our need to fit in could be perceived to be a major threat. As you can see, by allowing yourself to address these emotional memories and for any threatening emotions to surface to conscious awareness, suddenly the perception of danger dissipates, especially once you've been able to rationalise them and put things into perspective. This therefore allows the nerve pathways involved in the protective response to resolve. If this is a significant issue in relation to your pain onset, then it could have a major impact on your pain resolution. It could well be just part of the whole process though, so don't be too concerned if addressing this one issue doesn't have a significant response. This could be because there might well be other related layers involved, including related beliefs, behaviours and personality traits that also need working on. As far as items listed on your timeline is concerned, you might not have to address every single thing that you've identified, but if you know you're putting off tackling something, this is likely to be one that really will provide you with the most relief to address. At this point, I must remind you that if you have been diagnosed with a mental health condition, or for whatever reason you don't feel comfortable addressing any significant past traumas by yourself, then please do contact a psychotherapist or a counsellor, or get in touch with me for advice or additional support before considering using journaling as a means of moving on from them. There's no reason why you shouldn't focus on your journaling on current issues though, as long as it isn't related to any significant past traumas which you're not yet ready to deal with. The triggering of symptoms often occur after or soon after a time of significant stress, and this can be easier to identify when looking for underlying causes of your pain to then address. What can cause people to query a psychophysiological cause more is when everything seems to be fine and they can't pinpoint any specific trigger. In this case, it often is a result of an accumulation of things, maybe something really small being the straw that broke the camel's back, or not merely what was going on, but how you perceived it. Sometimes it might be that everything's going well and life's good, but maybe prior to this, life had been very challenging. In fact, often we cope well while things are going on around us, and even throughout a challenging childhood and early adulthood. But years later, minor health issues might begin popping up. Usually, because there might just be minor stresses in our lives at the time, we don't even consider that these could be related to stress earlier in our lives. As we get older and go through even the usual stresses and strains of family life, work, home, etc., we cope as best we can, but without knowing how important it is to look after ourselves and to acknowledge how we feel. These unresolved emotions build up like an emotional pressure cooker, and eventually an outlet is required. How and when this occurs can vary, but it's important to recognise that it's usually not just the current stresses that need to be addressed, which is why we encourage people to address significant past traumas too. Although journaling can be hugely cathartic and sometimes can be the main key to unlocking the pain cycle, it's also worth noting that there are often many other factors to take into account, and so it isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all. Actually, some people, when they come to me knowing about this work, tell me that they have been journaling for months, yet still can't find the one thing that they believe must be causing their pain. That's probably because there isn't just one thing. Plus, going over and over the same thing and not reaching a point of being able to let go and move on can become self-indulgent. Also, if they haven't put things into perspective, then there's often a tendency to ruminate about it later, which stirs everything up again, hence the need to offload about it again. It can become a vicious circle, and the next section will explore this further as we focus on self-induced stress. It is also important to note that no amount of journaling will help you keep on top of things if you're constantly on the go, rushing around and always putting other people first. This is why it's so important to look at not just what's happened in the past and journal about this, but what's happening now, and how might you be able to improve your own self-care in order to become more stress resilient and live a more happy and healthy life. You'll find various other uses for journaling in the ebook, and I would encourage you to take a look and use some of these as and when you feel they might be helpful. For example, using stream of consciousness at the end of the workday to offload your thoughts and to note down things to do the next day or insights you've gained can provide a cut-off from work before you go home, making it easier to be present when with your family and friends. Also, using some of the tools such as the pros and cons or benefits and drawbacks can be really helpful if you have a big decision to make and you know it's going around in your head. Studies have shown that this can really help you gain insights after being able to clearly see it on paper rather than it whizzing around your head all the time. There are other ways to become emotionally aware, and if you have hand pain or just can't get into the journaling, whether on paper or by typing, it might be worth trying out a few of these to see what works best for you. One might be to vocalise how you feel or pretend you're dictating an unsent letter. You might find pretending to speak to the other person on the phone might help, or speaking into a dictaphone. All these help because you're not just going over them in your head, when your inner voices just take over, but you're externalizing your thoughts and feelings. You might also find that exercise, maybe running or using a punch bag, might help you express any anger, for example. It can help to think about an issue or a specific person before doing this to enable you to bring these emotions to conscious awareness and express them outwardly. There's more information in the emotional awareness section of the programme, but hopefully this will have given you an idea of how you can progress, and I look forward to catching up with you again in a few days.